Nakahanda na ba ang San Antonio Spurs sa life without Tim Duncan? Para sa usapang yan at maging ang career ni Tim Duncan, kasama natin ang basketball analyst si Enzo Flojo. Enzo, welcome back to The Score.
Hey, Teed.
Alrighty, let's talk a bit about Tim Duncan himself and let's talk a bit about what the impact will be on the Spurs and how they'll move forward. Pero unahin natin yung pag-retire ng mamang to. After losing to the Thunder this season and disappointing fashion, of course, with the great season they had, anong naging pakiramdam mo para sa Spurs at para kay Tim Duncan? What was your gut feel?
Well, yung nagsa-stand out na scene sa akin yung na-block siya ni Serge Ibaka in that Game 6.
Was that his last field goal attempt?
I think it was his last one. And after he got blocked, you could see in his body language na parang something ended at that moment and he didn't even run back on defense anymore. Dun ko first na feel na this might be the last game of Tim Duncan. And eventually, it ended up being the last game talaga, no? I think the Spurs will be fine eventually. Of course, we'll probably get to that later. Pero itong si Tim Duncan nga, definitely one of the greatest players of all time, for me at least. Is he the greatest power forward of all time?
I was about to ask you, do you agree with that? Greatest power forward of all time? Well, a lot of people concede to it.
Yeah, ako, in terms of his achievements, mahirap i-deny yung sa kanya yung ganung label. I mean, his team has been to the playoffs every single season since he came in to the NBA. I mean, first season na high school pa lang ako, ganun nakatagal.
Pero ang laking swerte niya na kasama niya kagad si David Robinson.
That's true. Pero
that's no joke.
Props to him also kasi first season pa lang niya, if I'm not mistaken, Rookie of the Year and All-NBA first team na ata siya in his very first season. So he came in, he was ready, and he really made an immediate, impact for that franchise.
And on both ends of the court, I read that stat. First 13 seasons, he was All-NBA first and All-NBA defensive team.
Yes.
I can't even imagine a guy doing that for 5 years straight. And have you ever thought of? Can you think of anybody that consistent on both ends?
That long? No, wala akong isip for that long. I mean, this is a guy who he's never won Defensive Player of the Year, but to be on the defensive first team for that long, iba talaga yung impact niya on both ends of the field. He's the ultimate two-way player to see Tim Duncan, in many respects.
Okay, things that stand out, of course, for a lot of fans out there, whether you're a Spurs fan or not, is just his demeanor.
Yeah.
Simpleng basketball. No wasted movement, no wasted emotion. Ultimo facial expression doesn't waste any muscle, muscle energy.
That's true.
What does that like? I mean, what does that mean to tell kids out there how basketball is played?
Well, he's a very in terms of the current basketball landscape or context, no, parang anachronistic siya kasi he's a man from another time.
Yeah.
Pagpasok niya nung 90s, big men, they were in vogue at that time, and now guards na yung bida sa laro.
Saka yung mga big men yun, pinapa-stretch 4, stretch 5.
And still, throughout his 19 years, he hasn't only been relevant, he's been dominant pa rin.
Right.
So that's a testament to the kind of player he is. And that demeanor, that calm, collected demeanor is a trademark for Tim Duncan already. Whereas other players are going to be bombastic and sobrang daming, fancy.
But sometimes you need that flair. You need that oomph to be a competitive player.
Steady lang, tama lang yung kanyang flair. I mean, when he first came into the league, he had his fair share of highlights, dunking over people as well. But you still knew that this was a guy who didn't live on that flair. He lived on his production and, the success.
Right. Well, here's one thing. When Gregg Popovich gave a press conference, I think 2 nights ago, it was actually funny because he started it by saying, I'm forced to do this because he didn't want to talk to you guys. And he said something that I won't be here today if not for Tim. I wouldn't be the winningest coach, in his time if not for Tim. Now, I want to ask you, vice versa. Would Tim Duncan be Tim Duncan if not for Gregg Popovich?
I think it works both ways. No? I'm sure Tim Duncan had, he's learned a lot of things from Gregg Popovich, and Pop is so good na throughout such a very, very long time, he's been able to build a system that adapted to the changes in the game of basketball and still enabled his core player, Tim Duncan, to be effective on both ends.
In all those transitions through those 19 years.
From the David Robinson, Sean Elliott era, Avery Johnson, Tony Parker, Manu, to the Kawhi era. si Duncan has been a big part of all those eras, and Popovich as well. So that's a testament to both of their collective greatness.
All right. So now, where did the Spurs go? I mean, they prepared for this. That's why they sought out LaMarcus Aldridge last year, and
they signed Pau Gasol as well.
I'm a little surprised they let go of Boban. I liked him. A lot of people liked him, but somebody showed him the money. Okay. So where do they fit now? You got Pau, who's got probably another 2-3 good years in him, and maybe in the Spurs system, maybe even longer if they can stretch out his career. So how do they look now?
Well, they look good, at least in the short term. I think this year they're still going to be among the elite teams in the league. No? But again, if you look at Pau, Manu, and Tony, these are three guys who are really parang playing on fumes na lang itong mga to.
Okay.
And I'm sure Popovich can still squeeze out the best out of these three veterans. But the onus, I think, really is going to be on LaMarcus and Kawhi to carry this franchise forward. Obviously, they're going to need more players coming in, but those are going to be the cornerstones for San Antonio as they move forward with their franchise.
Do you think it had anything to do Duncan's decision timing-wise? Kasi ganun that Durant signed with the Warriors, and maybe in the back of my mind said, it's going to be really hard to win another one. Of course, you'll want to extend, not just for money, but to win another title. That's always been his goal.
I think that definitely he considered the landscape of basketball right now. No, you have a super team in the Golden State Warriors in the West. You have LeBron, Kevin, and Kyrie in the East, and maybe even another super team. Kasi may mga narinig tayo na baka may isang West player na lumipat sa Boston Celtics, diba? So siguro si Duncan naisip niya na tumatanda na ako. I don't find it as fun as I used to find it, and it's getting more difficult to be able to stay.
Very difficult this year. They want to really compete hard against those Warriors. Okay, through the years, Duncan has been, one of the prime reasons that the Spurs are always competitive. A 50-win team every season, except for the lockout year, which they won 30-something, but they still won the title. Anyways, will they still be able to do that? Will this be a test as well of how good really a coach Popovich is?
Oh, definitely.
Kasi kahit paano, he was blessed to get a Duncan. He had a Robinson and then a Duncan. So that's something that's a great tool to work with. But how will this test Popovich's coaching?
It's a big challenge for him to be able to find or retool his system in such a way that it still works without Tim Duncan. And in a way, I guess they've been preparing for that because his minutes of money Tim Duncan have not been consistent the past few seasons. So I think they know how to play without him for certain stretches. But this is going to be the first time in almost 2 decades they'll play with him without him in perpetuity.
Right.
And to try to insert Pau Gasol, who's a very good big man, but has a different skill set compared to Tim Duncan. That's another adjustment that Coach Pop and his whole team has to make.
Okay, learning lessons from this past season for the Spurs. Anything? I mean, of course, it was at the end of the day as good as a regular season team you can be. Playoffs are all about matchups, and it was a really tough matchup against the Thunder. But what could they learn this past season that now with Duncan away, how they're going to move on and try to still, target to be very, very competitive in the West?
Well, I think they really have to instill a lot of confidence in their cornerstone players, like Kawhi Leonard and LaMarcus Aldridge. Last season, Aldridge started quite slow, adjusting to the system of San Antonio. Towards the end, nasanay na siya sa system. And he did pretty well towards the latter part of the season and in the playoffs then. No? And I think they have to get him going as early as they can and for as long as they can throughout the season. He's going to be their main guy offensively.
I want to just jump in a bit. Sorry. Will these two guys now be demanding more of a leadership role? Kasi siyempre first year ni LaMarcus, feeling it out. Pero wala na si Duncan, wala na si Diaw. That's a big thing. Diaw has been traded away. And those two guys were leaders vocally on the floor. So will that demand more of a leadership role from Kawhi and LaMarcus?
But definitely. I mean, these two young guys have to step up in terms of production, but also in terms of their role on the team. Again, with the exit of Duncan and the impending exit of the other key veterans on this team, si Kawhi and LaMarcus, talagang sila mag-shoulder ng lahat ng responsibility. And moving forward, the San Antonio Spurs will only go as far as I think these two will be able to take
bring them. So a lot of it really falls on their shoulders, and it's going to be fascinating to see how Pop will weave his magic around those two again. Well, all the more we can't wait. 100 more days or so to the NBA season. Pero ganun po talaga. We'll talk a lot about these teams and how their changes are going to affect them. But Enzo, maraming salamat. We'll see you again soon. Thank you. Thanks, Enzo.
For more sports updates, keep watching The Score. And don't forget to subscribe.